Back to the grind at Leipzig after a weekend off. Got to play something that was a lot of fun during that time, in addition to shopping and going dancing and whatnot. So what has happened so far? So we're looking at, it's just hit night on the 17th. We've done 4 days, every single one of which Napoleon has basically won the battlefield. I'm not going to worry about those first 3 days, but let's talk about what happened yesterday just to catch you up on it. Let's see. Army of Silesia tried to reform back here after Russian attacks that happened the day before. And the French threw MacDonald and Bertrand and some other auxiliaries and a bunch of cav, including Nansouty, in and basically shoved them off the map completely. So Army of Silesia got knocked off the map this time. Army of Bohemia, not quite knocked off the map, but pretty damn close over here. There's a little bit of Prussians, and there might be, it looks like there's some Russians in there. I don't know what unit they're from. 107 is Wittgenstein. There might be some of the guards still there, but the rest of them got shoved off the map, either here or, that's the Altenburg exit, or the Bornholm exit. Over here, Clanau and Colloredo kind of held the line. They didn't get thrown off the map. And at this point, Napoleon has to make a decision of how he's going to defend against what's going to happen come the 18th, tomorrow. He knows the Army of Poland is coming in from up there. The Army of the North is coming in from up there. And there's still, because of the way that I've bent the rules, significant forces from the very battered Army of Bohemia and the somewhat battered Army of Silesia coming in. There's also some forces coming in down here at Pegau. He's not so sure about those. They disappeared for quite some time. They could be coming in here. I guess it's possible they could be reinforcing Silesia, but command and control issues cause a real problem with that. Napoleon has to hold his defensive, his retreat path. Now, that's kind of a weird concept here. Oh, geez, does the game have, I keep thinking the game has a line of communication rule of some importance. And I may be mixing this up with certain other games I have. You know what covers it for retreat paths? But what I'm thinking is that I may be mixing it with, I can't find it easily, towards a line of communication. I gotta find how line of communication is defined, and it may be different in the older rules. It's a big enough rule book, it should have an index, shouldn't it? I'm not finding one though. Okay. All right. Yeah, this is why I didn't find it before, is it's defined somewhere. I don't think it has much effect except the retreat. But the line of communications for the French technically is defined as the roads they came in on. Well, that's basically this shit up here. This is not his retreat path, though. Not if you look at the scenario where he's trying to withdraw from the board. He's trying to head down this way, which is towards Hanau or Hanau, which I've already played. So my feeling is I've got to keep a path down in this direction open. I don't know, not necessarily towards Erfurt, but maybe towards Merseburg. What is the scenario that says that? Running away towards, by saving the army west of the Elster, which is this big river running through the game. Now, Wiki has that mixed with the Plisa, or maybe I'm just not catching things correctly. So I don't know what's up with that. But yeah, this is not where Napoleon's forces arrived from. He's trying to pull out of Germany or further west in Germany if he wants to save his army. And there was discussion about trying to pull out. Actually, after the 16th, this is the 17th, another day, another dollar. But so far, I've been doing much, much better than historically with Napoleon. However, the noose is tightening. On the other hand, since I'm doing better than Napoleon did, and Napoleon decided to stand and fight, foolishly, and trying to hold on to Liepzig, things are a little different. Now, one thing that I've done that's significantly different is I've projected McDonald, I think, down here near Liepzig, which has a bridge going back across to that area. That's important because there's only 2 bridges getting you across the Ulster here. And I've got twice as many as I did before. There's nothing down here that'll work. And presumably, trying to move this way or trying to move that way is not going to be good because of the surrounding factors. But Napoleon did make the decision at Leipzig on the 16th to stick around and battered it out for another couple days. So I feel like since I'm doing better, I can't deny that. I've won every single fucking day. However, the numbers are very frightening in terms of, yeah, this is none of this is French coming in. That's a couple more armies coming in, and the French are beginning to get battered. Notably, the guard formations. The old guard is destroyed. The young guard are beaten up, especially Oudinot, but what's his name? Mortier is also taken some significant hits, mainly because high quality units will stand there and not run away, and they'll just keep taking losses until they disintegrate. And that is hard to recover from, because the way the straggler recovery rules work in this system, if you play with them, they're an optional, but I'm playing with them. The way the straggler recovery works is that as long as the unit's not destroyed, you can bring it back up to full strength. But all these destroyed pieces count against you. Now, the French have lost less than half as many pieces as the coalition has. But a lot of high quality units and a really they're outnumbered to begin with significantly in the campaign. So I may be facing much fresher forces coming in. I don't know the quality of this stuff. That doesn't look bad. Yeah, this looks like, the Russians look like regular. Bulau maybe not so much, but and who knows with the Swedes. I see a high morale on the artillery, but artillery is different from infantry. So we'll see how that all plays out. I'm not sure France really knows how good the Swedish army is, or Napoleon really knows how good the Swedish army is. Right now, it's nightfall, so the armies have to figure out what they're going to do in terms of resting versus repositioning. And the thing is, the units that I most need to reposition, which are these guys, I also most need to rest, and they can't do both. They might be able to get some rest in after the night is done, but they would really like to not do anything, and each unit would recover a strength point, and that might be the best move, and then fatigue myself falling back as daylight falls, and just, fall on the ground and camp out where we are in the lines of battle. Almost certainly going to happen here. But that means that I'm not really prepared when the Army of Poland and other stuff comes in not far from me and may be able to outflank me. It's all fresh. Doesn't mind marching through the night, taking a little rest. Might put things in a different perspective where I don't want to camp out all night there. So yeah, I just don't know. Both armies are worn out enough on this eastern flank that neither one wants to move. They're just recovering, and nobody's going to do assaults. And strangely, there's like, if you go to the NBS system, there's an interesting set of things that make you not really want to attack at night. You won't have fire combat, I think, like with here. You can do the melee, but the melee, everybody's got a reduced morale factor, which doesn't apply here. And that reduced morale factor basically means that melee's just about impossible. I'm just not doing it because but you know, the way the melee in that system works is the attacker has to check their morale before they make it in to actually do any damage. Then once they make it in, the defender checks morale. But there's quite the possibility that the attacker fails. Actually, I think they get they get hit first. I don't remember. We'll see. I'll eventually get to it. But anyway, I basically didn't move anything. I've gotten a whole night turn done today, and that's probably all I'm going to do. It's a gray and ugly day. But the main reason is I've sort of lost my flow for this. I'll get it back, I'm sure, whatever I was in. But I was in a very high state of wanting to play this on Saturday even, and certainly on Sunday. But I knew that I needed to get one of the games that I agreed to review out of the way fairly quickly. I had a great time with it, no problem there. But I think I would have had a really good time playing out the night turns on this. I felt a real kind of pull towards doing so and wished I had like opened up the video for it. I have a whole bunch of review copies that I have to get to that all just really came in within the last week or so. And on top of that, there's something new from GMT coming, and I've got a backlog of newer stuff on top of the whole huge backlog that I've got. And so I'm feeling guilty about, how I kind of dragged my feet through this, but yeah. We're at 3 a.m., almost completely through. This is the turn that the forces come in, and I'll get to that in a moment. Turns are, by the way, not all that much shorter at night if you pay attention to what you need to pay attention to. I've been taking some shortcuts, and those shortcuts mean that, well, basically I'm not writing any orders, which I could have done, but mainly I'm recuperating forces. That's not really the shortcut part. The shortcut part is I haven't been in detail trying to figure out, hey, this unit can move, this unit really needs to rest for the rest of the night to get its point back and stuff like that. I'm doing a little bit more of that this turn, and it's taking at least as long as like a full turn with battle was taking in the last day. So anyway, doing some of that. I've got Victor's forces kind of trickling back. I figure I can do that. I don't know, without orders. I don't know why. I mean, some of these forces are just strung out all over the place, and there's no center of gravity, and they're not facing an enemy. And I'm really unhappy with the idea of being able to create a blockade that prevents somebody from getting on the map. It's not necessarily in the France's favor to be able to be doing what I'm doing. And for the coalition, it's a whole lot easier because they've got almost no units on the board, and they all pretty much need to recuperate. So I can do what I was doing before, which is just, hey, I'm not moving anything unless it's an oddball. Like, I was dealing with some of the oddball characters that were floating around because I felt like I needed to do something with them. But now the reinforcements start coming in. Okay, great. Bubna, no big deal. I've got him sending over. He doesn't have any orders whatsoever. He doesn't have anyone who can give him orders. He's part of the Army of Bohemia. He's attached to the Army of Poland. Colorado and Klenau are sitting back here with the Emperor. The Emperor can't give orders. He's, not part of the command chain in this, unlike at Austerlitz, where actually, I think the Tsar kind of took command. But anyway, forces are trickling in, and it should be sufficient for something, I guess. But new problem showed up. I may have mentioned this before during setup. The Army of Poland is a mess. So it's one huge fucking corps under Doktorov, and then an advanced guard that I guess doesn't have to follow orders. It's like Bennigsen's got pure command of it. Bennigsen can make his decision at any time. Now the question is whether or not it's under orders, because there's a one-turn delay when you follow orders. I don't view it as that big a deal. Bennigsen's probably going to have to give orders to Doktorov to get him to move that big corps. That's the structure of how the game works. So the advanced guard can go do some neat stuff. One question, though, is whether the advanced guard has its own fatigue ratings. And if it does, those are going to be partitioned against Bennigsen, not against the Doktorov corps. That's going to make life a little bit more complicated. And I don't know. It's another little weirdness. There's no special rules about it. Because, of course, the game is so configurable that a large number of players may not be playing with the command rules at all. So it kind of doesn't matter. But yeah, do those have to stay within range of Bennigsen? Is he the core commander for them? That's kind of what I'm assuming. But maybe they're just fully independent units, in which case they never need any kind of orders or command control or anything. It's all kind of a toss-up there. Anyway. No shit for me. I flipped these up, thought this was still night, and started processing the French turn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just sneak another night turn in. But I'm not going to let those come in any further than they already did. Because that's really the one processing piece. I don't think that gives a huge advantage to anyone. Probably helps the French a little bit. But simply because they have their pieces on the map and can recover, but most of their pieces are recovered. And I've already made the rolls for them, and I have no idea how to undo that. I was really hoping to get some orders out and start moving some units before dawn came. But yeah, I just could not bring myself to not refresh my units as much as possible during this period. Plus, there's certain advantages. Like here I have a numerical superiority. Let the coalition fall back if they want to. Same thing over here. I have a superiority over there against Klenau. Let them pull out if they want to. That's their call, man. If they don't want to be directly engaged first thing in the morning, it's up to them to get out of there and to waste the action in doing so to set up a better defensive line. Then if they do that, I can pack up and go home. But because I'm, not allowed to move next to them during night turns and whatever. But they chose not to throughout most of the night. They might do it right at the end, and there might be some advantages to doing it that way, but I can't tell for sure. You can see him, my chicken is back, one of them that are down there. So yesterday, I didn't get much play in, and what I did, I kind of screwed up. Got that extra turn. You might be able to see better there. Just lost chickens. I ended up going for a walk, 5 to 6 hours, at least 6 hours outside the house. More than that, 7. about 6 hours of it hiking around the city and whatnot. And the latter part is the problem. I feel almost crippled now. Last night was even worse, but just, my hips, my back, everything hurts. I don't remember this kind of thing happening. I remember, you feel kind of exhausted, but clearly feeling my age now. Trying to guarantee that I get in a turn, though. So for the French turn, hey, it's morning, stuff is starting, but really that doesn't change anything anywhere here except Nansudi chooses to rest instead of moving, whatever. Over here, I'm pulling, I guess this is Mortier and Victor, back a little bit. I feel like my orders, I'm abandoning my prior orders, and that I should be allowed to fall back behind the river. I don't know. Should I have to? If I was really being harsh on this, if this was NBS or whatever, I would require a written order or an initiative check. So I don't know why I'm allowing myself to do that here. Marmont, on the other hand, was camping out right next to the enemy, and if the enemy's not going to pull out, I'm going to chase him off the map, which I think is a big thing, because those are going to come in not until the next morning, I think. Speaking of which, I've got some troops that the coalition is going to have coming in the morning. Now, the forces in that little central region, the Pegao Road, actually, I'm probably going to bring those in, but I'm probably not going to bring these guys. These are Army of Silesia troops, and they're facing a rather massive force there. So I'll probably give them a rest opportunity where they get the night's rest during the morning or whatever, and just let them each get a point back for each of those units. Over here, things are even more obnoxious. So over here, I'm probably violating something, at least the spirit of the rules, by moving MacDonald and Mortier backwards a little bit. Although I still haven't even figured, and Napoleon's gotten them together to talk with them, but I haven't figured out where they're going to end up, where my defensive lines are going to be. Here, though, again, like with Marmont, I'm waking up next to the enemy. I'm continuing on with the attack. I never abandoned any orders for anyone, except, well, this turn I've decided Mortier, and probably last turn Victor, had abandoned their orders. But this is really problematic, because this is where the Army of Poland is coming in. There's some danger that, who is it, Murat, who's in charge here, is going to get himself in a bunch of trouble over here. Because this is where the main fresh units are coming in, is here, and then way behind me, which is not good at all. Of course, this is also where Nansudi is heading, but those forces start, the Army of the North starts coming in not too long from now. I really ought to be out of here. My feeling for why it didn't happen, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I know why it didn't happen. It didn't happen because I was trying to recover my units. But the reality of it is, if you tried to correspond that with, other situations, there are times when all the intentions were to pull out or something, and troops just ended up staying in place and not doing what they're supposed to, not because of not following orders, but in the sense that the orders were never even given. There was just no decision made to pull out within time. And usually you don't see things like that. I don't know. In smaller games, there's kind of this real focus, or much more of a focus, on trying to get everything to do what you want it to do. But it's a lot harder when you get this kind of scope, and it's one of the things I like about it. However, I have this tremendous malaise about me in terms of continuing and completing this. And it really started with corrupt bargain. I just felt like I was enjoying that so much. And I think I was enjoying this a fair amount, but it's now really, really hard to come back to, especially since it's been a few days and I fucked things up yesterday and everything. I'll push through, but oh man, it's just, all I want to do is just curl up in a ball and whimper to myself and play video games or whatever. It doesn't help that work is being really frustrating right now. can't fucking figure out how to do things. All right. Anyway, we'll be trading some shots here. I needed a several-hour nap today, and grabbed that, but that means I only am able to inch out one turn in this game. So, the additional half turn for the coalition. First thing is, I had the number of markers for the turn wrong. I was using ones. I had that up there. It should actually have been sixes. It didn't really matter, except if it did, which I don't think it did. I don't think there was anything routed before last turn. But anyway, I fixed that. We've got forces coming in at the Pigalle Road here. Not much the French are going to do about that. I've got plenty of orders to give. They're going to get a chance to assemble and do whatever the hell they want, which might be move this way in support of the rest of the Army of Bohemia. It might be just hang out. It's probably not assault the forces across the Pleiße, but probably they're going to hang out until at least noon, because that's the earliest time that we're starting to get anything that might come in on the Altenburg Road or, no, not Magdeburg, the Borna Road here. The little force that's holding here, I don't think can hold. And that's somewhat problematic. One of the units disintegrated. The others are trying to make a desperate line. If Marmont attacks them and continues to attack, I think they're knocked off the board. If he pulls out, which is what we were expecting him to do, this is what I was expecting to do as Marmont, yeah, sure, I can hang around, and then the French would have to dispatch something to take care of it. But I think Napoleon's just going to leave Marmont with his orders and chase them off the map for the last part. The leaders all allowed to catch up with the rest of their troops, letting the troops have the 12-hour delay or whatever. Over here is a little iffier. The coalition forces actually pushed forward a little bit, trying to throw things off as the Army of Poland comes streaming in. But Pujol is facing some of the Austrian lights. They've got their cav in the way as well, so that might develop into a little bit of a cav battle. Artillery that came from Colorado's forces scared away some of Poniatowski's forces. His command is the weakest of all the commands in terms of really being permanently battered. Lauriston doesn't have a lot of staying power before he falls into demoralized. And Rainier's force is kind of this weird mixed force. He's got like the Saxons in him and stuff. So there's not a lot of staying power there. And I don't really want to stay here. And this is the problem with Marmont forcing this way. I need to fall back and get close to Leipzig with all my troops before the Army of the North starts causing real problems. And this force probably needs to help cover in that range. Some of this force needs to help cover. I'm really feeling overstretched with the French and the threat of the Army of the North coming in. And in particular, I've got this big force back here, which is waiting on the Army of Silesia. And again, I don't need it right now, but it's in a really strong position and would be able to defeat the Army of Silesia if it comes in. But I don't think I can stand there because these guys took too long before, they still haven't started moving. Obviously, I can't unbottle this or I've caused a problem. This is my escape route. Those guys are all that's standing between Leipzig and the Army of the North. And if you look at, this force or that force, they have enough room to cover and fill in the gap here and defend against the advancing forces, the Army of Poland, the Army of Bohemia, whatever's left of it. But I'm still left with, well, what's going to defend against the Army of the North? Something's got to get there. And it's not just Nansudi. I could throw him in there. I definitely had plans for a more robust type of defense, and one that would collapse on itself a little better. This one is in real danger. Anyway, that is it for today, because I've eaten up most of the daylight, but I am getting a little bit more excited. I forgot to mention, the forces from the Army of Silesia that I decided to delay, I gave them each 1 health, for that, again, a 12-hour delay, basically. So, yeah. It's not a great deal. The biggie is they didn't want to come on the board. They would have refused to come on no matter what. But I got nowhere else to bring them in. The 6:30 turn, orders beginning to get assigned. I forgot to move Napoleon to go. I don't know what the hell to do with him. I guess he should probably go see Marmont. Let's put them together there. So I got to call Marmont off, but the forces that are sitting here, here's where I'm getting mixed results out of these early morning attacks. Marmont's attack is going quite well. There was very little left of the Bohemian army, driving what's left of it off the board, forcing it into later in the day. It's going to force whatever recombines here when I leave that area to really kind of have to spend a lot of time forming up and preparing itself. It probably won't be ready to be used as an attack force on this day. But over here, and Schwarzenberg is here. If he goes off the map, yeah, he'll come in earlier. But he's in command of the Army of Bohemia, which stretches from over there, the forces over there that have no orders, to over here where we have basically no orders. And I think Bubna is going to get included in there because he's part of the Army of Bohemia. I don't know what he's doing with the Army of Poland. I don't know if he should be under their orders. That's what it kind of feels like. But there's no flexible order command situation where corps get detached to different armies or anything like that represented in this game. But maybe there should have been. I don't know. If there had been, Army of Silesia would have grabbed a couple of corps from Bohemia over there. And it's real iffy. So I'm just making it kind of I'll let you roll your initiative if you're being ordered by another army without the penalties for an initiative roll, which for most generals is not very good. And usually the penalties aren't that big a deal because you're waiting around trying to figure out what the hell to do. But anyway, without an army command, that's going to make it much, much more difficult to have any kind of coordinated attacks or anything. Not that the coalition can really do good coordinated attacks, only able to command one corps at a time. Over here, things are a little weird, messy. Rainier has continued pressing a little bit, especially against Clanau, but it didn't go terribly well. We turned the cav away with some artillery, which was helpful. But for the most part, we're not getting the kind of advantage of routing Clanau off the board that we were hoping for. And we have a real time limit based on the Army of Poland coming in. That's too big a threat. Poniatowski cannot hold that off. So Murat moved to give, or gave Lauriston some orders. I should go give Poniatowski orders to get out of there. But I'm going to have to withdraw that whole force. And it's a slow operation because Murat can only give one order per turn. But yeah, and I can kind of drag my feet with that order to give some cover to Rainier as he pulls back with his situation. More broadly, what are we doing? Well, I started giving my orders to the French, and I believe I'm sending Victor up north of Galgenberg to defend the line up here, with Mortier going north of Kohlenberg to the woods there. And of course, I'm giving these flexible, like, try to connect up with whoever the hell you find there, right? But that leaves me the Galgenberg area, which I think I'm going to have to leave to Marmont. I would love his force to be somewhere else, doing something else. But somebody's got to cover the gap against the Army of Bohemia. Unfortunately, Marmont has one of the better striking forces in the French side. I don't know what the hell Nansuti's doing. He's standing on the board kind of confused at this point. He didn't even move because he certainly doesn't want to keep going east. He probably should be trying to protect the flank up there against the against the Army of the North when it comes in. I have made a decision that this line is untenable. There's nothing wrong with it. It's incredibly solid. The Army of Silesia has no chance of getting through it. It'll have to shift north. That's kind of nice. I like some of the effects of that. But I need these troops. I need these troops against the Army of the North. So all my careful setup here, plus I do have a gap here that I'm trying to cover with cav or whatever. All my careful setup there, I'm going to throw back to that starting line that I was in north of Liepzig. I don't know who's going to go there. Probably send Bertrand to that side. Send MacDonald on the longer march to be to the east of the Leipzig garrison, and just try to put something in the way there, because I've got nothing that I can definitely commit there. I think Poniatowski and Lauriston are going to have to help fill in the gaps here in the east. I may be able to get Rainier to help cover against the Army of the North, but it's possible that the Army of Bohemia could actually skid along and kind of outflank any position that I have. So, because I'm not going to be able to cover the board with anything. There's going to be gaps in my line, and I'm going to have to, the order system is very fuzzy in this, but by being so, I feel it allows you to kind of say, hey, defend this general sector, and if you can't connect up and there's gaps, don't let the enemy through them, is kind of the idea there. I don't feel like that's as easy to do with the NBS system. I feel like you're expected to write more explicit orders. I'm not sure, because some of the orders that they pre-write for the game, they give you the scenario and they're like, well, here's the orders you start with. And I'm like, wow, those are a lot weaker than I would normally accept. And sometimes they're so detailed, and that's because different designers write different games for the series. You write the specific rules for it, and maybe they have different views of what orders should be. For this, there's no examples really. You don't enter the game with orders already set, and the way the rules are written is kind of fuzzy. The fact that there's no map locations to identify makes it especially difficult to define regions that you'd be in defense of or whatever. So I just play the orders a lot fuzzier here than I do with the NBS system. And that's a little disappointing, but it also, I think, gives me a little bit of accuracy. Again, I would never play one of these games opposed. NBS I have no problem with. I've done that. CWB I have no problem with. I've done that. I feel like there's so much interpretation that has to happen in this that the only way you could play this opposed is if you either impose your will on the other player in terms of how this is to be done, i.e., when you're teaching someone. And that's fairly easy to do, but there's enough fuzziness in here that I'm like, well, I'm imposing my will on stuff that I don't really believe there's good answers for, or you just have such an intimate relationship with that other player in terms of this is what we play this a lot, and we've come up with our decisions on it. We're going to commit to it a lot. But I don't see the limited number of games in the series to be enough to really, really justify that. I don't know, maybe. But I have enough trouble just myself dealing with when I play differently in different games. You know, I interpret the rules differently in different games and of this, and for no real reason except like, I don't know, they're so damn ambiguous in some cases. And there's so much not nailed down. Anyway, I'm chattering more than playing, and that's no good. Inside of the 6:30 turn, I'm pulling the rest of the Army of Bohemia off there. Oh, fuck, I forgot to move those guys. All right, well, they'll deploy. Start moving down the ridge line. I'll get to that in a bit. I also forgot to move the Russians, the Army of Poland, but I started my fire before I did. But we've got what's looking like a definite possibility of a cav battle starting up here. I threw those light infantry up front. They're not high morale, but they're somewhat protected by the cav, which means that the cav that the Russians have might be able to stop Pujol from being able to hit them. But he might not, which may be a good enough reason for Pujol to make that kind of delaying attack. Fighting's still going on in this region, however, and you can see the French aren't, you know, I mean, there's more number counters over on the Austrian stuff. That's mainly Klenau's units, but the French units aren't holding up too well either. And look, one of the units that broke had a fairly low morale, like a 7. I looked at it, just, you know, marking off because it didn't have many strength points to it, or stacking points, or whatever you want to call them, size points. It had. It was listed as grenadiers, and then I looked at it's fucking Saxon grenadiers. But yeah, I gotta get those guys, Liechtenstein and whatnot, moved. 7 a.m. turnout. French advanced a little bit. You can see using squares, whatever, because there were cav there, and the coalition pulled off with no additional losses. So fine. Still forgot to do anything with Nansudi. I've reached a certain level of apathy about the game. That's one of the problems, and I'll get to that in a moment. A little bit of fire exchange here as Lançon starts to withdraw. You can see the French not withdrawing in particularly good order. A lot of disordered units there. These units haven't gotten their orders to get out, but they'll probably backpedal next turn anyway. But okay, so one more thing. Colloredo got an initiative order. He's going to go smashing through here, which, if the French are withdrawing, will probably be very advantageous, and it looks like they are. If they're not withdrawing, it'll help take Rainier off Klenau's case. And unless the French are doing some sort of feint or something, and if they are, they're doing a horrible job of it because their army's disorganized from it, it'll be no problem whatsoever. And also, if it is a feint, this column would do problems. However, I completely forgot once again about I think I may have done those. I don't fucking know. Let's rest them too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I didn't move them. It's no harm with these guys. Nothing's happening down there for a long time, and I can't get orders, so I'd be relying on initiative to do anything, and there's kind of nothing I want to do. I'm bottled up. Like, the two parts of the Army of Bohemia that are the only two things that are on the map, well, no, there's the Army of Poland, are here and there, and they can't really do shit. And it looks like I've, caused the French to withdraw here. There's not going to be an attack down there. But here, forgetting the Army of Poland Russian column, including Bubna somehow. I don't know what the fuck his orders are. But, nobody has orders. That's the problem. Maybe Wittgenstein, I'll go give Doktorov orders. Try to figure out what the hell to do. I'm guessing he has the right to order Bubna around. I don't know. I don't think he has any right to order Colorado around though. So, and Colorado has like a 2 initiative, so he really sucks at it. But it's clear that I'm not facing anything on that flank. But yeah, the Russians should have advanced and deployed against the French and made their life harder. And I'm just like, well, fuck it. Because honestly, whatever destroyed the army means, I don't think happened historically. The French lost this battle, but they wouldn't lose the game and the coalition wouldn't win the game because the French army wasn't destroyed here. There was enough left that made it back. You can see it in the Hanau scenario. You can see it in the defense of France. So, okay, if that's the case, you know, what the hell do they mean? Well, eyeball it, whatever, sure. But it's just, there's some level of, well, look, I'm not going to stop the French from being able to withdraw in fairly good order if they're leaving now. And if they're not leaving now, yeah, it would help me to smash into those units. But man, it would be a pain in the ass. And they're kind of disorganizing themselves with their withdrawal anyway. So maybe I'll get a chance where I don't have to fight my way through Pujol's cavalry in quite the same position that I do. Like, that's really part of the problem is I'd have to launch a cav attack. And Pujol also has the, well, if I want to defend this, I have to launch a cav attack. Neither one do I want to do, but I basically don't want to do anything with this game anymore. And, you know, you go through waves when you're playing something this large of some level of sort of falling into autopilot or whatever, and you can't do that in, you know, the tactical in this kind of situation. There's big deployment changes happening and everything. When I'm doing something like EU or whatever, I can kind of stay static throughout the game and do the same actions each turn and whatever. But this is a chaos situation going on up there, and I really should be reacting to it. But on the other hand, the fact that I failed, well, sometimes commands fail, and I'm good with that. From sort of a philosophical point of view about the game as a whole, I'm kind of good with somebody didn't do something right or a unit got lost. I've got a lot of lost units on this board. You don't know how many of them are dead and how many of them are just connected with the wrong command. But yeah, just kind of had to wash my hands of all that. I'm more interested in moving the turn marker along than anything else. It's kind of like, fuck, I don't care if I actually do anything. Just let me like get this shit over with. I've got 2 more full days. I'm like not even 2/3 of the way through this thing, technically. I think it will be decided before that, but I don't know. And clearly, you know, using the Army of the North, the Army of Poland here to smash into, well, see, that's the whole thing. To smash into what? To smash into Pujol's cav? Do I really want to? Because Poniatowski is behind that. And I'm not going to, unless I smash the cav away, and my cav's lighter and it's not likely to do that, I'm really not likely to be able to get to the yummies that are behind it. So resting isn't even that bad an idea. I would not have made that choice. I would have been deploying these forces for battle, but honestly, it may have been the better choice. All right, that's probably it for today. As of this weekend, all Saturday I blew off. Okay, that happens, but usually I squeeze in a turn. And then today, it's moderately late, and I've gotten a half turn in for the French, just to kind of keep things in the game. I'll probably play the coalition turn as well, because almost nothing will happen during that. More orders going out. It's a little painful to try to envision where units are going to be strung out and everything. I'm trying to write some fuzziness into the orders in such a way, you know, with connect up with and stuff like that, so that I can shift the lines to cover what I want to cover. Again, I don't feel like I can do that in NBS, but I feel like I might as well here. Marmont heading off to wherever the hell I dispatched him. This is what's hard, is that there's so much of the table that is in motion at once right now. I mean, yes, there are some fixed areas down there and there, forming up there, but that whole line way to the west is breaking up, which is kind of a shame because I'm giving up the bridge, the bridge that I wanted so desperately, but I just don't see how I can afford it. I knew there was a reason I was all the way up there. And then this force also breaking up and heading for where it goes. And then this force, after it's done its job on the Army of Bohemia's main portion, heading to wherever the hell it's heading. There's sort of I'm hoping to create a sphere almost with Leipzig as its western, northern, I don't know, northwestern kind of boundary, with the forces over there holding, making sure that nothing untoward happens on my communication route. Although, honestly, I don't think anything can anymore. You know, I mean, you don't know, right? That Austrian force, one, it could actually, the artillery can't cross the stream, and then there's no crossing of the Elster. So the only way would be to withdraw from the map and come back up this way. And that's obviously not going to happen. I got to get the Army of Bohemia together into one striking force, whatever worth that is. And then up here, the Cav kind of protecting the line. There's still some of Rainier that's engaged. And neither side is really happy with this fight. They're both not really in shape for it. I think I probably should have just withdrawn Napoleon, especially given how little I feel like I want to play. But I'm not sure, you know, other than it taking up a big hunk of my living room real estate, I'm not really sure that I want to move on to the other things. So, like, you know, I've got this Galicia here that I've got to do a review for. That's a review copy. And I got a couple of games that I need to do that for. But I am finding it so hard to do anything other than completely immerse myself in, like, right now it's an MMORPG that I'm playing. It's actually quite a bit better on the story than most of them. So that's kind of cool, but it's still... The advantage, of course, is it's a free role-playing game on the computer, essentially. Free up to level 60. But yeah, I will try to get the coalition forces moved as well this turn. I'm so dreading doing anything. And, you know, it's the same kind of dread that permeates my whole life sometimes accompanies gaming. And it's just really there. And some of it is, whenever I have moments to think on my own, I'm just so crushed by the emotions or whatever. And some of that is because I'm hiding more, but yeah. And I did the coalition side of that turn. Beginning to deploy Liechtenstein and Gulai out there, just really on a holding pattern. The eventual intention is to be able to rebuild those two corps. Colorado has, as I mentioned before, orders to march towards Gross Poznań, sorry, and he's engaging and doing a little bit of hurt, and it's really kind of interesting because you can see it's nothing magical about the French. The magical thing was that they were winning the individual battles. When you win the individual battle in an area, and here, I should have pulled out at night. I should have pulled out at night because I wasn't planning on sticking around. So I've essentially lost the battle and I'm retreating, and now face the cost of retreating, which is either you turn around and kind of run, in which case bad things happen, or you try to hold the line in places, in which case bad things happen. And yeah, it's not great. Doctrinal, I don't feel like he has the orders to move forward. He just got them. His plan is to march and take a position here. So we'll be holding this line with the Army of Poland and that part of Bohemia. And that's about as much as I can do until that shit comes in. I think. Now, on the positive side, I happen to know that the French are trying to take this line as well. Well, not this line, but a line kind of cutting through that way. So there's a potential for conflict there. There's also a potential that the French may just not make the advance against a fresh and powerful new army with significantly limited forces. I gotta say this, it doesn't take a lot to get me back into being interested. I'm interested again. I'm going to squander that. I can guarantee it because I'm going to go play my video game. But I'm getting drawn in, watching the things happen. The only real thing that I'm seeing, though, is I don't think Napoleon has a chance of doing anything spectacular anymore. He did very, very well on those first 3 days. On this day, I'm running out of gas, and there's just too much facing me. Just too much. Which means I probably should have left on the night of this turn. Had I been able to rationally make that decision. Unfortunately, I didn't feel like I could. I felt like I'm doing better than Napoleon historically did, so I should have a chance at what his historical plan was on, by this point in the game. Well, yeah, but I just don't see a plan. I don't see anything except maybe kind of try to defend and react. And that is not the best way to fight a Napoleonic battle, which I think we will see very soon. Defense has its advantages still, but in general, it's the offense it's a well-applied offense where you have a concentration of force that's going to break the enemy line and that's going to allow you to get the advantage of the pursuit, which honestly, the pursuit is what has caused this difference in the casualty levels. I can almost assure you. Although I did advance one of Colorado's big units without paying attention, because I tend not to be able to pay attention to just how beat up something is, because all the information is only on the sheets. Again, the same problem happens in NBS, but there are two ways to record how big units are in NBS. One is the casualty sheets, and they are, to me, the gold standard. But there's another mechanism that can be used, and you could here too with strength point, with the number counters, but that creates just so much confusion because there's so many number counters on the board. There's another way of representing things in NBS for losses that makes it pretty fucking clear that, oh yeah, I don't have much of a force there. And the advantage of that is I can use that second means to determine my fire levels and everything, which don't matter here. And since they don't matter here, I don't feel, any compulsion to track it on the board and whatever. So a big unit will end up in the dead pile, like just happened, just because, hey, oops. Now, it also matters more here, because in the CWB-based games like NBS, you differentiate casualties and stragglers. You can get the stragglers back, you can't get the casualties back. And the stragglers that come back and reform the unit that lost them. In a campaign of this size, it actually makes sense to say, hey, you know what? Somebody might take a company here that's in fairly good shape, a company there that's in fairly good shape, make a new brigade out of them. And you saw things like that happen in reality at Gettysburg, where corps were kind of pieced together. Pickett's charge was pieced together out of some units that were essentially detached that hadn't gotten too badly beaten up in the first day. First 2 days. But his brain doesn't quite connect there. But here, that's all handled kind of abstractly, which is, I think, a good answer, again, for games of this size. I think it works kind of nicely. But what it means is there's a penalty to actually losing units because you can't recover those units. And you don't have that same penalty in the NBS series. What you end up having is a bunch of really battered units that you could combine together and try to create something useful out of. But it just ends up a stack of really low morale shit that has some fire value, but it's high. It's fairly weak. Anyway, like I said, I'm probably not going to take the opportunity that I just had for engagement and excitement in the game, but it isn't that far to tap. And while I'm playing, like work, like a lot of other things, my mind is on things that are not troublesome. So I decided to try to squeeze another one in, and I got at least half a turn in. Nothing too exciting, just forces moving for the most part, even up here, although the disengagement again caused some pain. And I'm having to dislocate, I'm having to expend effort with the cav to try to protect. And by effort, I mean they had to actually take a fatigue point on to move fast enough to wheel around into position. And I don't know how good a protection that is. It's all a question of how hard this is going to come forward. I think the line here is not going to hold against them. And that's going to throw me into a little bit of disarray because this is the defensive line that I foresaw for the French. Although I've got some fucking confusion going on, and it's not unreasonable. It's because Ney is giving orders to MacDonald that don't align with what Napoleon's given out. And that makes perfect sense, and I'm okay with that. It has to do with how far apart the battlefield is. I'm going to allow it to just play out until somebody is close to stops it. And then for the coalition turn, first off, I thought the reinforcements were coming in this turn. I looked a little more carefully, and this is 8:30 coming up. So I got another turn before they start streaming in from here, which is, the French are not prepared to deal with that yet, not by a long shot. Again, that whole setup way down in that northwest corner or whatever, that was against the Army of Silesia, that was a serious mistake. And, if I was carefully tracking when reinforcements were coming and everything, I wouldn't make that kind of mistake. But I thought I could cover it with my other forces. But honestly, there's just too much map for the French to cover everything where there's possible entry points that close to the entry point at this time in the game. Earlier, they were able to do it. But now I'm in trouble. And I'm also paying the cost for the withdrawal. Supported by some Austrian cav launching a charge. That's part of Colorado there. We've cut off some forces. We're busting up Rainier. It's beginning to look really, really bad for at least the forces in this sector. And I feel like I'm not going to be in position in time to deal with the Army of the North coming in this stuff's just taking too long to get there. And the Army of Poland, it's opposed by garbage at this point. Rainier is the strongest force there. Lauriston and Poniatowski are the ones that are standing against him, though. Rainier has orders to go against the Army of North, but he's also getting battered at the same time. So things are beginning to look really, really ugly for Napoleon, and he may have to pull the plug soon, which I'm all in favor of, because that'll shorten the game if I actually feel I have to withdraw from the Liepzig sector entirely. And then that withdrawal is going to be kind of interesting, because I gave up that second bridge now. And if I'm calling the withdrawal, well, maybe I can retake it and cross there again and push forces back that way. But maybe I can't. The real question is, those forces all come in not all that long from now, a few hours, 4 hours or so. And now, well, I've got them marked as Magdeburg, but that's that side of the map. If I'm withdrawing from there, they're going to come streaming in and cause a potential real problem. As far as I see it, though, I can't really cut. Oh boy, this is getting. Separated. And I don't know what I can do. Nothing with just one hand. Yeah, I feel like the whole plan is beginning to collapse at this point, which is probably how Napoleon felt. Should have withdrawn earlier, man. But that wouldn't be Leipzig to me. It had to happen. He has to want to stay and destroy the coalition army until it's obvious that he cannot. And I don't even know if that's obvious yet, but we'll see. We'll see what happens if the Army of the North comes busting through. Then things are looking really, really ugly. We still have night turns, though, which make it fairly easy to disengage if that's what you want to do. Half turns have become kind of a heavy thing again. Got a bunch of units, again, moving around to try to get to their destinations, but I'm finding more problems. First of all, I found a little lost lamb over here, finding his way back to Augureau. That's some artillery, and you can see he has basically no artillery. He has some cav deployed in line for some reason, which you can't do that. I'm going to just back them up. I don't know what they're up to, but I thought it was infantry, I guess, while piddling about. Much more problematic is I'm discovering no one's covering this. Again, lack of communications, whatever, between the different sectors of the board, probably doing a better job than like you would see in any kind of opposed game. But this kind of disorganization is getting maybe a little less, a little bit more unbelievable. So I don't know who was supposed to cover this, but I had thought someone had been sent there. They may have been earlier, and then I launched this attack against Colorado, and now in the withdrawal from in the withdrawal from the Army of Bohemia forces that are here, that plan wasn't entirely kept into play. And blame Murat for this. It's all his fault. He's the one who gave the orders. So I've given order, before I had this whole line built up here, right? All three of those corps were defending basically the area north of the Universitatis, Tots, holes. I can't pronounce it anyway, so fuck it. And that was Napoleon's original plan, right? Was to put a fair amount of force there. Well, there are gaps in the north that had to be covered. So I've got Poniatowski's 8th Corps heading up that way. But I also sent Rainier that way, which means the only thing that's fucking holding here is Lauriston. That ain't gonna do. Murat's gonna have to give him orders to get out of there, and I will throw that there. One nice thing about that is it shortens my line. It allows me, I'm gonna be up at the Galgenberg. I've got orders for this area here. I just have to pull Lauriston back into this area, and I think I end up with things covered. But this was not the intention. The intention had been to prevent the Army of Bohemia from being able to combine, and that woods has been their bugaboo this whole damn game, and now I'm giving that up. I think that's for the best, but once I start thinking that, I'm like, well, why am I trying to hold the Galgenberg? Why am I trying to hold anything? Yes, the Galgenberg's a nice ridge. It gives me a real power against any advance in this direction. But, you know, there are gaps. It's not like a solid ridge line that controls a dominating position in the field. As long as that woods connection is able to be made, Army of Bohemia could swing around this way, or it could conceivably go this way, depending on which way the forces want to move. This is a big block in the way of it, though. So I think it's worth trying to hold. If there's any way that Napoleon can pull off a victory here, a real victory, not just, you know, a casualty advantage stalemate or whatever, which you would have to say would be a victory anyway compared to the real situation. But he would get that by withdrawing at this point. So yeah, if there's any way to get that real decisive victory, it's going to have to be letting the coalition attack. Hold on. Is the attacker has an intrinsic advantage in a game where they can concentrate their forces against maybe a weak point, a perceived weak point in the enemy defenses. Now that's what you'd always be trying to do, but the scope is big enough on this, and there's enough confusion going on right now that I fully expect to see the French reeling back just like they were here. Now, they made the attack there. It just didn't pull out early enough. Oh, well. All right. French side of the 9 a.m. turn. Forces abandoning their positions continually up there. Moving into their new positions here, giving up territory to the Army of Bohemia once it wants it. Whenever it decides it's going to come back on. And then over here, we have Murat's little army pulling back further, undergoing a little bit of fire to no effect. Reorganizing, Murat gave Lauriston some orders that make more sense given the rest of the orders he gave out. That's the one that didn't work. Somebody was supposed to be covering this and they just weren't given the orders. It's not an optimal situation. There is going to be a very weak corner coming through here, which is basically the remnants of Poniatowski and Lauriston. Nansouty finally on the move, pushing forward, not under any particular orders, but he's got troops near him. There's an obvious threat. The Cavrils are in disarray in this system. Well, there's an ambiguity and I'm playing it a different way than I sometimes play it. That's fine. Chances are he could get an initiative roll for it. And maybe that's what I should be doing. He went over and rallied this router. Napoleon's coming up to take command of where things ain't going so hot, which is Murat. And Murat is running away from Napoleon so he doesn't get yelled at. it may end up helping along these lines. However, the mighty Army of the North, one of two unbroken armies, will be coming on, and things are about to get serious, I guess, again, as the Army of Poland and whatever you want to say about this, like, stuff from the Army of Bohemia, including Bubna, who comes in with the Army of Poland, is actually attached to, up to, whatever. I just don't feel like I can give, I don't feel like I can give Colorado any orders, but I feel like for now I can give Bubna orders, and I did with Bennigsen, and use him as part of the Army of Poland because he enters with them. Again, there's a lot that's just left kind of unclear. See, an Army of Bohemia unit that got lost up there somehow, or, it just happened to come in with them. That seems unlikely. Again, I don't study these campaigns too much detail, so I don't know what the story is with that. But my feeling is that is pretty much attached to the Army of Poland, so I'm operating with it that way. A number of units did rest operations or whatever, where they just reduced their fatigue levels because the alternative was to lower their morale. And there's no real reason to be hurrying too much. Although you could probably make an argument for someone who rested. Marmont, but he's got a long fucking march ahead of him. You'll see when he shows up where he's going to show up. I don't remember what his orders are. Marmont is the 6th Corps. The line between oh no, he's fine. He's holding this line. There's not going to be there's no real threat there, so yeah, that's fine. And Victor also rested. Again, this is a line against the Army of Bohemia right now, which is in no position to do anything. The only force that's in any good situation is Colorado. This is going to start recuperating now that it's positioned itself. I haven't finished the coalition turn. All I've done is fiddled around here a little bit. Stayed away from the big heavy stuff. But before I show that picture, what I wanted to do, I had 2 thunks. The first one, let's go with, is the blasphemous one. Somebody ought to make a game on this. Maybe they have, and call it the Battle of 5 Armies, just to confuse the shit out of people. It might do better, It at least grabs your eye. You go look at it as a Tolkien fan or whatever, and then you're like, oh, wow. But the other one actually had more to do with, I entered this with enthusiasm and excitement of a certain sort, and also with more of that than the reality holds out, as is often the case with these big games. Now, I play them out and I finish them, but just to give you an image of this, my thought was, oh yeah, I'll play this and maybe a couple of things in between, and I've done that, not much, but then I would, what the hell did I play? I had to be playing something else big, because I had to take a break from something and go play down the basement before this started. I don't remember what I did. It couldn't have been too big, though, because I would remember anything really huge. Like, I'm thinking I did things like Agricola and stuff. Did I take a pause in the middle of that to go play 2 minutes to midnight or whatever? Because I know I took a pause and played that downstairs. Oh, there's our squirrel for the day. I've been having a little, I think they're juncos, but I'm not sure, hopping around on the porch picking at stuff too. But my ambitions exceed the reality. So my thought was, oh, after I do this, very soon afterwards, I want to do DAC. often have these thoughts, I want to do this big thing right after. Now, I often have thoughts about, I want to do, X after I get a couple of things done that I know I need to do first, and then X gets put off. Dak has had that happen a number of times for no great reason. I pushed my way through the OCS rules again. The only reasonable side, I did Burma, and I didn't have any others at that point. So, okay, that's fine. I've picked up quite a few since then. I took a look at the Blitzkrieg Legend or whatever and said, oh my God. Because my thought was, this is where I want to start, right? There's no Poland one that I'm aware of. So, yeah, this is where I want to start with these. And that looks like one of the messiest, most complicated ones that I may never even get to. Just because there's just so much right off the beginning, like the Russian invasion, the invasion of the Russian area, at least Russia's not very well prepared for it. So you're not looking at two completely built up armies hitting each other with lots and lots of air power and everything. At least that's sort of my interpretation of it. It just looks like the West Front one is just going to be way too much going on for an early choice. And then I did the weird little intro one, I don't remember, Reluctant Enemies, that I can't recommend because it's just not that interesting a scenario. I should have played Tunisia or something if I was going to do that. But after I waded through that, I was supposed to go on to something else in OCS, and I just never did in the near future after that. And it's one of, when you are playing in a series, you spend the effort to learn the rules. It's hard to spend the effort to learn them again, which is why a number of series have not gotten pushed as far as they might. I'm thinking Musket and Pike in particular here. But some of the GBOH and stuff and things, although each of those is a little different, they require, and when you're playing a big game, not that Reluctant Enemies was, but when you're playing a bigger game, sometimes it's hard to keep going in that series because you feel like you really need a break from it. And a break in some cases might mean a couple of years. I don't think I'm going to be playing another one of this series for a long time. Not because of this game, though, so much, honestly, as because of the more modern ones that have come out, which are smaller map and just don't excite me. But anyway, all these ambitions, and I'm like, oh, geez, I don't feel like doing anything that big again. And then I have thoughts of looking at the NBS, and I know a lot of people want me to do that, and I do. But I know it's complicated, more complicated than the CWB type stuff. And it's hard to want to go back and fight my way through that. I picked up Talavera or whatever right about the time that I was getting back into gaming, played it, but it was previous to me doing these videos and everything. These are post me meeting my wife because she had me get the camera. For what little use I got out of it for anything there, but yeah, it was a weird situation. But anyway, I will move on with the coalition turn, and then that's probably it for the day. It looks kind of dark. It's really not that late, but I know me. I'm feeling fatigued from work and whatnot. One of the uses. There's the little guy I was talking about. Busily doing something, capturing stuff for nests, but because he keeps picking up little wet things and keeping them in his beak. Anyway, thought I'd catch in with him. Two interesting things. One, the column is coming in there, and I wrote orders for him. Presumably, I probably should have written them at the beginning of the day. If you're looking at the NBS style rules for that, you're supposed, well, initial orders don't exist in this game, but I threw them in from NBS, from the CWB NBS tradition. Because without them, you you can't even really march on the map, you know? And so a lot of times I have initial orders that are just go join something. But this is a new force coming on the map. They probably did some scouting, saw some gaps, and so I came up with orders on the spur of the moment, really, that actually well represent the situation currently. Their orders are to cut through here and try to take Leipzig from the side, because I'm counting on another column that's coming in very soon afterwards, going straight up the middle and then having a reserve column, which seems sensible, and it fits with what's going on right now. And here we're trying not to fall, my poor crippled ankle. I have my walking stick there. I'm like a crone with my bent stick, and just need to and go out picking mushrooms and feeding them to the little children. Over here, the Russians continue pursuing. They're burning themselves out fatigue-wise a little bit, but got some nasty hits, a couple of them, on Poniatowski and Lauriston. Lauriston caused some disruption and actually threw him over the demoralized level. So I made the checks for that. There weren't many. Should only be one. Yeah, I don't count. Well, the 118 should probably have checked one as well. I did check for that already, so. Yeah, it would make a second check though then. Okay, it goes too. That's fine. Get to something there. But the Russians were kind of hindered by Pujol's cav, which, yeah, I'm tiring it out, doing this run towards, you know, trying to protect the flank, the rear, and then, you know, constantly rotating. It's much better to have corps cav do this because they don't cost you anything at all, and you're probably running anyway. So, but here, yeah, the cav corps have unique capabilities. They wear out very quickly if you're using them as cav compared to what infantry corps cav do. But if they're kind of free from the orders considerations, they have their interesting factors. But yeah, they scared the Russians off for a couple of reasons. The Russians didn't have their cav in the front. The way I bring columns on, I bring the infantry up first because it's pretty damn potent. And if you can't get the infantry deployed, you can't really fight. But in a pursuit situation, it's not the best thing to have out there. What you need cav to protect your advance against a pursuit, because that's where enemy cav are really actually effective. That's where defensive cav are effective, is against a pursuit. They can throw this kind of pick it up, and you're just like, well, geez, if I move forward, they're going to get countercharges on my infantry, and I don't get a chance to turn into square. And if I advance in square, well, I'm not pursuing anymore. So you need to get your cav up to try busting them out of the way with that. Even almost as effective, or maybe more effective, depending, because the cav may just fail, is bringing your artillery up. But again, I throw the artillery way at the back of the column, which is really where it belongs anyway. You'd have to deploy very strangely to get your artillery up front. I feel like I kind of fudged that. So like with the Prussians, I have some 2-stack units. These are all big infantry units. And I've got the cav the artillery intermingled with them. But you know, they were kind of waiting up there and moving very slowly and such not. Bernadotte did not want to get engaged here for some reason. And as you can see, had Napoleon been a little bit more on the ball, he probably could have done a great deal more. But now that he's on the defensive, it's really tough. There's my little buddy again. All right. I don't know. You know, if I say I might come back, I won't. If I say I won't come back, I probably will. So who knows? Skip the French half turn this time in terms of coming on to record. So 10 a.m. forces pulling back. Now, over here, we actually have something kind of interesting worth mentioning. This is basically the defensive line. Actually, this is. That is going to be presented to the Army of Silesia, plus Latour's Cav force. Okay, that's artillery, horse artillery. That's not a lot. It means that a lot of MacDonald is going to be facing the Army of the North, but it does mean that the Army of Silesia, which isn't that badly, see, I tried to fix things, but I made them worse. The Army of Silesia isn't that badly damaged, so this is not sufficient. What I'm hoping is that it's not really due in, I think, until tomorrow morning. Right. No, it looks like it's coming in. Looks like it's coming in the afternoon. So, yeah. Now I thought I chased some off during the morning hours, but I guess not. Maybe in the wee hours of the night, and I kind of cheated those couple of units. Basically, I look at the whole running off the map, coming back. It's all my invention, right? So it's like I'm doing kind of a weird fuzzy type of thing. I was actually thinking about that before I started talking. Was, you know, I could track it with the hour that they're due in and whatever, and put all kind of little paper pieces on things. I didn't feel like doing that kind of level of detail. Once upon a time I would have. Now I just have no real interest in that. And yeah, this is, I thought I fixed this. Everything's, see, the problem is everything's kind of taped down, and so moving one piece means everything else would have to move. And if I was truly OCD about things like that, I would deal with it. I'm obviously not OCD about certain kinds of things. It disturbs me, but not enough. I mean, the game came with borders on everything. I trimmed many of them. Okay. So the maps did. So what I've got facing the Army of Silesia is probably not enough. It does mean all of MacDonald will be facing the Army of the North. However, they're in a race to get to where they've got to go, as is the second young guard under M named Mortier is trying to race up there too. And it looks to me like the Prussian forces under Bülow are going to get there first. That's Third Corps. Everything packing up and leaving here. A fairly strong front being presented against the remnants of the Army of Bohemia that will be coming in. Some of them today, the rest of them on the 18th. I wonder if I'm playing an extra day here, like if I missed moving the day marker forward. It just feels so long, but it's a big game. Over here is where things are sort of really kind of happening. Colloredo has come, and he's more or less where he's ordered to go to. And for that matter, so is Doctorow. He is still being stymied by those Cav, although I forgot to fire. I managed to unlimber an artillery here. Let's shoot the heavy Cav. It's the more interesting. 3-2. Okay, nothing happened. And I got a little bit of engagement here. And the thing is, I get two shots, right? I charge up, I get to fire, and then I get to fire when they try to move away. So that's kind of nice. And actually, the withdrawal fire is the stronger of the two. Especially if I just march down the road past these skirmishers, which I may choose to do. It's only a 1 in 6 chance of hitting them. All right, so that's the end of the 10 a.m. Unfortunately, I'm in a conference today, and I don't know what that means. It's also a pretty day. I may end up not playing much, although I haven't been playing much anyway. Maybe I play less of my video game, for whatever that matters. All right. Oh. Funny story with this So I've got this, I'll get to it when I do it. I've got these review copies of this 1914 The World Undone. In the first set, the counters were mixed up between East Prussia and Galicia, but I had all the counters. He sent me both the games. So I figured, well, okay, I guess they swapped them out. But then I checked the maps, and I had 2 copies of the Galician map. And customer support on these things are handled by his no longer printer, but whatever. There's this weird bad blood going on there, and I don't want to get involved in speculation or anything there. But then I emailed and they sent me another copy of Galicia. Sometimes I'm kind of confusing. I read the email. It's pretty clear if you read it, but it does mention both East Prussia and Galicia in it, and maybe there was an error there. I was more worried that like the printing manifest said this map goes with each of the games, because it made sense to get the counters screwed up for both games, for the 2 games in one order. Like, it just is an assembly error, sort of. It didn't make a lot of sense for 2 maps of the same game, but hey, shit happens, whatever. But then requesting again, getting the same map back. They're covering and sending another one. There's no problem anywhere along the line. It's just, wow. This kind of thing happens to me. Jumping in for a moment to video because we're seeing something we haven't seen in a little while, which is the Russian Army of Poland is starting to push the French cav screen aside. I've got the Russian cav up in front finally, where I can start doing this. So here, we bounce that cav out of the way. That's gonna leave things open for a pursuit on Lauriston back there. Now, part of the problem is my orders aren't gonna allow me to go any further, to go too deep into that. I've got orders basically connect these 2 woods. And yeah, I can fudge them a little bit, but I'm not gonna go plowing into Lauriston with all my troops, which may mean that this doesn't affect much. Even more, we're having a Russian charge here, which the French, I guess, react to. That's out of the zone for the heavy cav, which is why it went this way. I also have the artillery up front, which can do something, but I can try to hit it with the light cav, because otherwise I'm just a sitting duck, which is the problem. And it looks like at least one of them is just a sitting duck. So I end up with a countercharge with 1 unit, which is not going to go well. The odds were bad here, 1 unit against 2 as well, where I was looking at 1 to 3 odds. But I caused a casualty, and they just caused a disorder. So, the way the chart is, disorder's red is worse than casualty. It is in terms of pushing the cav out of the way, which is sort of the goal of cav usually. But I've seen cav wear itself to the bone, winning those little fights, and just, some of them end up over in the dead pile because of it. All right, I'll come back for an assessment of what happened in the turn overall later. For that final view for the 10 a.m. turn, I think. Let me move these because I'm used to doing it before I finish my vid. Okay. MacDonald still trying to reposition himself. Now he and Mortier are kind of in a position to try to stop von Bülow, who, it's hard to see. There's so much, the light is really, really iffy at this point. But von Bülow is heading down towards, to try to outflank Leipzig. Winzigod has just started coming in. He's got orders, of course, to go smash straight forward, being the Russians. And Bernadotte's going to try to protect his Swedes and use them as reserve. Got to throw a little bit of role-playing in, right? But it looks like nothing's going to get here in time, and that French position is going to be threatened. This could end up a worse situation than France historically faced. Likewise, Bennigsen is going to talk to Doctorow to continue the pursuit, because it looks like, hey, we've got them in this nasty pincer here. Things are going to get really chaotic here as a wave of French hits the wave of the Army of the North being pursued by the Army of Poland. That's going to be a nastiness happening there. And waves are coming from different directions. So you got troops from here that are trying to position themselves, but you also have troops from back here trying to slide up into place there. So that's going to be ugly as hell. For the most part, these forces, well, those cav attacks didn't do too much. I was getting fatigued. Instead of resting, which I should have, I did a half move and didn't fire off my shots. Oops. All right, so I got to do the shots, and I'll come back maybe if anything exciting happens. Meanwhile, the Russians are putting pressure on Pujol, forming up into squares so they can advance on him, like some kind of Roman tortoise formation. Colloredo doesn't have an easy way to get orders. He's also facing Nansuti's guard cav, which, that can't be pleasant, you know? But I have a lot of artillery for Colloredo, which means that I can scare those cav away. The cav were kind of thrown in there. Unfortunately, as I start to look at what Lauriston has, I'm going to have to pull Victor up to cover that gap, which means the Galgenberg is actually probably going to end up largely vacant. And that's my, main breakwater for the Army of Bohemia. But I don't expect the Army of Bohemia to be hitting anytime soon. Unless things work out really, really magical for the French, I think they're going to want to pull off a withdrawal at the end of this day, because it don't look too good. It's not developing in a way that Napoleon has any chance that I see. Bad stuff is going to happen. And, if he held the territory and didn't get an army destroyed, I would say, well, that's kind of a draw, minor victory in his favor or whatever. But if he withdraws the army without, getting too badly beaten, given the first few days of it, I'm kind of tempted to say that also is a draw that didn't go too badly for him. Certainly better than the historical result. He couldn't afford to lose these armies, or this army. However, this is a place where a concentration of pretty much all the coalition forces is happening. Would he be able to maybe deflect them better in other situations? The answer to that in Germany had been not really. What happened was they kind of avoided Napoleon and beat up on his marshals. And, the French just were, without Napoleon there, the French weren't able to pull off the victories at all. It became a battle of attrition, and quite clearly the coalition has the greater numbers. So the hope at Leipzig was to turn that around. And in a sense, strategically, if Napoleon doesn't get that massive victory at this point, there's not really much left, He can fall back and do a desperate defense of France, as he did, and do a damn good job, and maybe buy a little bit more time because he has more army. His army's not as beaten up as it was historically, perhaps. We don't know, because this pincer could do a great deal of damage to him. I'm just not in a position to react, in part because I feel like I have to keep this protected, and And then there's sort of the, well, I can't let these guys out. And, well, I'm letting the whole Army of Bohemia out already. The wall here would have prevented that. Now, granted, the Army of Bohemia, the Army of Silesia, these things have been weakened badly. But if they get to rest a day, they'll be in much, much better shape. And meanwhile, I'm suffering currently the effects of a retreat. It's not been too bad so far in terms of units lost, but it might get a lot worse with that column coming in. All right, I think that's enough chatter. I'm trying to convince myself to go for a walk. I had a squirrel sunning himself on my porch. I love that they do that. It was something I didn't know until I lived here, because I never saw it at my mom's. She has a deck kind of like this, bigger, but with the railings and everything. And I never saw the squirrels just lay out in the sun there, but I don't think the sun, or I think the sun doesn't hit as strongly there as it does here. I don't know. Anyway, also I think I got more squirrels, a lot more squirrels. All right. Got a human walking down the street. I won't show that. I'm pushing out the 10:30 turn in the last of my light here. It's 8 o'clock now. It stays light to a reasonable hour, but this takes a lot. I wanted to again zoom in because the French withdrawal, Pujol here has been doing cav charges, thus fatiguing his unit to try to fight his way out. He may be doomed. He may be doomed. It looks really ugly, but he's chased away a couple of enemy cav, but he also had a disorder there, which is going to be unpleasant because that means the infantry could conceivably march up and just start shooting. And the way I read things, the voluntary disorder would become a rout at that point, which might be the best thing for me. I'm not sure whether it's allowed or not. In certain plays of the system, I've allowed cav to just essentially voluntarily continue to retreat 2 spaces as a disordered unit without getting the rout. I'm not sure which is the intent. This is baked into the basic rules. I don't know. Luckily, though, Dokhtyarov has not gotten his orders yet. So Bennigsen just got to him. So honestly, there's a fair chance that there's not going to be a major pursuit yet here. But here, yeah, I can justify sliding in. I'll get rid of these charged markers. They're not serving a purpose there. Elsewhere, I mean, I've got more light now than I'm going to in a little bit, so I might as well. Victor pushing forward, trying to cover some of this gap. The threat of Nansudi is a pretty potent one. It's going to take a lot to scare him away. He's beginning to set up artillery and whatnot. Mortier fatiguing himself, trying to get into place. He's at the end of that line right there. MacDonald also fatiguing, charging through Liepzig, trying to get... He's in the same position, essentially, as Mortier, but he extends further north and... Well, north? No, call that east. That way. It looks like north to me, man. No one else really doing anything. And then I go on and take care of the coalition. Poniatowski and Larson are trying to withdraw and get their line into some sort of order. And they're not going to stand, though. And that's really the problem. If that portion collapses and that portion's under threat, everything back here has got to start heading back. And that's, I don't know, a good chunk of Napoleon's army is being threatened to be cut off. And I don't have anybody to give them orders. I've got, Napoleon and Murat busily trying to save the situation. They could get initiative checks. There's no harm in making them. In fact, I should be considering them very shortly. But yeah, given the threat to those units, I feel like the withdrawal is almost assured. Bülow's column is sliding down for its outflank. Wingrode coming in behind, and of course, Bernadotte in the rear, heading straight for Leipzig. The Russians don't have a serious advance. I created a square here, I'm not sure why, because I got two calves slamming into the ass of Pujol's non-disordered units. And that's probably going to be very, very painful for them. The lighting has gotten so bad that Colorado, I know he's got units up there that I can recover strength from. I can't find the specific units. This is just a really bad spot on the board, no matter what I do with the light. And I just was like, well, if I have to reach and look under each unit, which is what I was doing, screw that. So I just said, pretend he's with that unit, because he's within range of any of them. But other than that, nothing going on back there. They're just recovering, and the light and reach is easy enough. It's not just the light, it's the reach. It doesn't look that far, but it actually is a little painful to get to. I am not looking forward to when there's fighting right near Leipzig there on I want to say the east, but that's like southeast side. I don't know, because the orientation. Anyway, I'll take care of those cav battles. If anything terribly exciting happens, like I destroy a unit, a pair of units or whatever, that would be impressive. But otherwise, we'll just assume bad things happen to them. It's rolled fairly low, and cav charges are not that effective, honestly, against cav or artillery or anything, even limbered artillery. What we had, one thing we did was we cut these guys off, but what we got was a disorder there. Okay, great, they get to run away. That's pretty much, the effect that I wanted out of the disengagement roll, but whatever. And then here we actually slammed into their butts and didn't get hurt. We got a morale check, which could have disordered us instead. So nothing terrible there. And that gets us now to the 11 o'clock turn. Try not to make a mess. I already made one. Yeah, make one there. I already made one over at over here. I think those are all PMs. That's the Army of Silesia. And like Klenau, like Gulai, these things, the Army of Bohemia, when it comes in, these have to rest so much that I'm really putting my expectations on the Army of North and Army of Poland being able to, wow, this is doing something weird, like trying to find a face or something. I don't know what it's up to. It's like centering on the light, maybe. I don't know why the little flashlight thing doesn't kick in when the light's this iffy. But relying on those two armies to do the real damage today, while the other armies are going to recuperate, try to build themselves up to a point where they're not essentially just demoralized wrecks. And, we've already had one corps off the map because of that. We got others that may have taken enough losses, things like the Guard Corps, that I don't know if they're going to be able to, be an effective force. They got good morale, so that -1 or -2 that they get for being demoralized isn't that terrible, but they're not Guard anymore. Speaking of which, I was thinking of the Hanau scenario. Let's say the French do withdraw. the Hanau scenario that I played, and maybe I said this already because it's an obvious thing, but it came to mind again if that's the case. The Hanau scenario that I played would be very, very different than if, say, the French withdrew here. First of all, I'm not sure Bavaria switches sides because it's not clear that Napoleon lost the battle. Let's say it just happened right now. Napoleon's victorious, but decides to fall back anyway. I think Bavaria bides its time on switching sides until the coalition pushes towards them a little closer. But the other is Napoleon's army would be a lot less battered if it's moving through now, but it would also be almost completely lacking the guard. The old guard especially, which was incredibly potent in that scenario. But honestly, the guard did most of the heavy lifting in that scenario for me. They're not around anymore, and yeah, there are still some decent corps, but yeah. Anyway, that's just some vague musings on the matter. All right, that's it for tonight. I had to put my little dining nook light on. Brings back some memories, that little table there. When we had no heat, the one day that I had heat because of my wood stove, we ended up playing a board game. And honestly, I think that was one of the last board games we played a couple of years ago. We probably did a couple of other things. But yeah, things had, whatever drive I had put into my wife towards board gaming kind of disappeared largely after we moved here. We did a little bit, but not much at all. Anyway, it was kind of an oddity to do it here. Like many things in our life, it just evolved into something that's not too different from being alone. Except without a purpose to whatever. Anyway, crossing here a little bit at the end of the French 11 a.m. turn. Because some exciting things happened, although not so much on the field. Let me explain what happened on the field and what else happened. So up there, you've got Bülow's Prussians almost in contact with the Leipzig garrison, because I can't remember the guy's name. It's like Origi or something like that, but it's an Italian name that just doesn't sink into my memory. We have very, very clearly things are becoming untenable here against the Army of Poland. Lauriston cannot hold the gap that he was told to hold. Poniatowski is, I knew he was weak, is holding a reasonable size amount of real estate. And the French aren't getting here in time for Bülow. So MacDonald and Mortier are force marching. They're basically supposed to be covering this area, more or less. Their orders kind of conflict, but that's okay. But Marmont is in line where he can kind of see that they're, I'm guessing, scouts and whatnot, that he can kind of see that there's a gap in the line. So he made an initiative check and actually succeeded. And instead of doing what he was ordered to do, which is defend from the Galgenberg kind of down to Oudenau's forces there with the Young Guard, he's going to fling himself up here. And this is basically his target area, right where the gap is, and fill that in. Is that a reasonable assumption? Well, see, I wouldn't have rolled for it if I didn't think that I need the extra force there. But on the other, so like, you wouldn't randomly have him make that kind of bad decision. The player has to be behind it. But I'm behind lots of bad decisions, and that may be. In addition, Victor made a roll and failed at his initiative. But Marat's got to go down and talk to him. We need more force coming down this way. I don't feel like Victor's orders allow him to go much beyond about this Lieberwitz. And I think what I really need is a drop down to there. that really starts to let Colorado and Clanau to slip through by the Universalis holes and get their artillery through there and everything, which will allow some kind of consolidation of the Army of Bohemia. And I may be basically abandoning the Galgenberg, but the alternative is to just see my flank rolled up behind me. So that's what Murat is doing down there. Napoleon will probably yell at him about it because things will go wrong and he'll blame him, but that's okay. And I guess that's sort of the excitement aspect, is that there's some orders changing yet again. And this is the problem I have with the defense in these tactical games, not in terms of like, oh, this is ahistorical or anything, rather in terms of playing the defense, is that sometimes you end up in this chicken without a head type situation. And I feel like Napoleon's army is largely reacting in that sort of way. It's like, oh, we didn't plan for the amount of time it would take and really understand how when the enemy was coming in and stuff like that. We were too far out, all kind of shit like that. And now a sort of panic arises in the player's mind where they overreact. And I really like that. I really, really like that kind of aspect of it. And I find that happens to me. It doesn't only happen in defense in games. In fact, I usually like defense, playing the defense quite a bit. But in the case, because I'm thinking of the case of Monmouth, where maybe not the game, well, I'm not remembering the game that I had on video at all. I'm remembering an opposed game I had where I lost, one of my major brigades, I think is in that, is the size in that, I don't remember. But one of my major forces, I think it was Scott's brigade, just got cut off. It was a good, powerful unit, and I kept throwing unit after unit, got to save Scott, just because he was in a bad position due to his attack. So attacks can go terribly wrong as well. I just find that, especially in the Napoleonic era, because of the way the attack is not that, is not as penalized as it is in, say, American Civil War, that the ability to flexibly choose where you're going to hit and for the defender not to know where the attacker is going to go. Now, there's also the aspect of terrain points. If there were, hey, it's worth X points to hold the Galgenberg and X points to hold this would be a very, very different game, because I would be looking to cause casualties and hold the defensive terrain that would get me the victory, right? And that's kind of how the Gettysburg games generally are. But with this, it's like, I'd just wipe out the enemy, man. The land doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And that's perfectly reasonable, What's Napoleon going to do from Leipzig? He's going to fall back on France, no matter what, eventually. The question is how long he holds here. In terms of, if he wins this battle, he might be able to maintain a more orderly withdrawal from Germany. But he can't stay this far forward even, He's just too outnumbered. If he completely destroyed all four armies, yeah, that would be different. Then he goes on the offensive. But yeah, the terrain itself doesn't matter. It's the capabilities of the armies. So anyway, I'm going to try to squeeze in the coalition turn, because I've got like an hour lunch break, and then I'm going to have my lunch during the conference because I'm just watching it. I'm hurried because it started and I got my timing bad, but whatever. It looks boring, this part. So Dokhtarov's force rested. He was getting close to the fatigue point. This is going to be a problem that we're going to see in a couple of places. Bülow had to make that same choice. He decided to push forward. It was too important. But he's got to rest at some point, and that's going to give time for fairly fatigued French forces to get in place. It's a hard call, but the attacker can't really afford to hit enemy units when he's fatigued, because he takes that first fire, and morale, you don't want weakened morale. These are line units in both cases, so then they fall down to, like, you know, maybe not raw conscripts, but low trained recruits or whatever. That's 7 morale that the Hohenlohe forces, is it Hohenlohe? I don't know. Doesn't sound right. Yeah, it is. It's like Hesse-Hohenlohe or something. Had. And that doesn't hold up very well. We'll talk about a little bit more on that. There was one cav charge. The Russians sent some light cav against Pujol, and they kind of bounced off of that. So no more. The artillery is too far away with the skirmisher screen to do anything. Over here, so Bülow is pulling his forces all across the stream. There's just too many Russians for me to be kind of straddling this swamp. I did enter the swamp, which isn't terribly pleasant, but it was the only option, I think. Bernadotte showing up. And this is the interesting thing. The Swedish army is very interesting. It has some really good guard units, like 9 morale guard. That's not quite French guard, and certainly not old guard. But it's up there. It's up there with well, I don't know, maybe not really good. They're up there with the Prussian grenadiers and stuff like that. The really good, solid units that are part of the guard formations, but not the highest guard units. But still, 9 morale is pretty nice. Their artillery also has a 9 morale, but isn't fast or anything like the French artillery. But their regular units are that kind of conscript army or less trained army, 7 morale. That's not going to hold up very well. Their cav appears to be fairly strong. I think what it is that they raised up a bunch of troops for this campaign, and you know, didn't have the same kind of training that, say, the Russians have, who not only raised up an army, but they've been fighting the French on the way back from Russia. The Prussians have had fairly good quality line troops. The Swedes haven't really seen much battle, and I think you can say the same about most of the Austrian commands. They're in that 7 morale range, which just, it doesn't cut it, man. It doesn't cut it. Not on the offense. All right. I think that's it, and it's time for me to eat and pretend that I'm learning something. Okay, end of the 11:30 French turn, and Marmont starts taking his orders to head off, further exposing things to the Army of Bohemia when it comes in. Remember, he was supposed to be guarding south of the Galgenberg and linking up. And that was going to be a mighty, mighty defensive position. However, circumstances and his awareness changed things. We'll talk a little bit about that. He's going where there's a lot of troops already going, but that may be for the best. Victor got orders to try to cover this flank, try to prevent the Army of the North, the Army of Poland from just rolling up the French flank, essentially. He's not in place yet, but he's close enough, and Nansouty is doing a good job, just destroyed 2 light cav units with his own light cav, but guard. And it's kind of going to cover the Colorado, Klenau gap there, as well as harassing the Russians. Pujol having a bit of trouble, but Murat came up, rallied some of his forces. Napoleon's up here rallying some of Lauriston. Just trying to desperately make this line hold here. The interesting stuff is some of the interesting stuff is what's going on up here against the Army of the North. So I have the Liepzig garrison. Okay, great. Mortier has just rushed into place. MacDonald is rushing in to take up much of the same territory here. Marmont has orders to make his way up to here, which is obviously going to conflict. But that's territory that Rainier has rushed into the gap to fill. Again, this is all ordered. Marmont is the only initiative guy, and he saw the gap and said, you know what? Screw it. Army of Bohemia, we beat them. We beat them several days in a row. Let's just march up here and deal with this fresh army. And that might actually work out. Here's why. If I can get sort of an overwhelming force against Bernadotte's Army of the North and beat it, keep some of my units in reasonable enough situation that they can move in against whatever else is the threat, whether it's a reconstituted Army of Bohemia or Silesia, both of which are probably going to have trouble fighting today, or this Army of Poland cutting across here, in which case I'm in the right place, already, and I don't have to move much. I may be in a position to still win that glorious victory that Napoleon is seeking here. On the other hand, if the Army of Silesia is in better shape, then then its withdrawal kind of seems to indicate, and it is in better shape than the Army of Bohemia by far. This may not be enough to hold them off. They may launch an attack, and that could conceivably, this is not strong stuff here, the Leipzig garrison. They might get some nice artillery, though. They might conceivably be able to cut the Leipzig connection. And that would spell true doom for Napoleon. If he can't get either of those two bridges, he's in deep shit and will not be able to withdraw anywhere reasonable. Now, sure, maybe I could head back this way and look for another river crossing or whatever. I don't even know how to represent that. I would say that's Napoleon's army looking to try to avoid being completely destroyed because they got cut off from their crossing here. And that would not be a good situation, in my view. But complete destruction of two cav units, one was a Cossack, one was a light cav, sure, whatever. But yeah, this is where cav excels, is when you can get on the good odds table and roll really well, and you get that eliminated, and you just wipe out a whole stack at almost no cost. Well, in this case, at no cost. So if you can catch cav in a bad position, or infantry for that matter, but it's more likely going to be cav than infantry or artillery, you can really kind of change the nature of things. Of course, that was a fatigue point to do that, to do one little charge. I don't particularly want to do more charges. What do I care if these things form square? And in fact, they probably should have tested. It might slow up the Army of Poland a little bit, but anyway. This is a Thursday. I have dancing tonight. Maybe the last time I have dancing on a Thursday. It's been every month for the past 2 months. And I kind of like a once a month extra dance night as opposed to there was something that was going on every week a couple years back that well before the pandemic, so that was just too taxing. I couldn't make that. The once a month I kind of like, and the DJs are kind of my favorite pairing, so it's a shame, but they trying to keep something going on a weeknight is really, really tough. The first night a lot of people showed up, but that was sort of the grand opening of the bar, a bar with a long past that they used to DJ at, and it kind of saddens me, and it sucks that it's a rainy day because I can't dress the way I want to if I got to hike there through the rain. But anyway, the effect on the game is I probably am going to be able to get the coalition turn in and nothing else as I steal some time. Coalition side of the turn, and I've handled the stuff down there, back here. I've even done Colorado and part of Bubna. And now I come to the, hey, I got problems. This is a sticky situation. The Russian army, most of my cav has been chased off. I got Bubna's cav, but I can't charge through my own units. I feel like I'm kind of being frozen by this one guard cav and Pajol's here, where there's very little I could do. I mean, I could continue pursuing some units down this way and try to fight those weakened French units with what little I have that can get forward. But I may actually be better off just resting another turn. I don't like that at all because it's just not putting me in the right position. But I could unlimber some artillery and get rid of skirmishers and stuff like that and line up some shots to try to scare away some of the cav. One of the problems, though, is this hex is too full for me to move. This is horse artillery, so I could actually swing it into place and get a shot off at that guard cav. But things are too tight. And if I try to make room for them, well, then I lose my advantage in terms of being able to get the rest in play. And I just don't know. Okay, so my solution was indeed to pause. I set up some bombardment on that cav, which didn't do much. Not sure what I'm gonna do next turn, but I at least recuperated some of my cav. So if they can find their way through some holes in the line or something, maybe they can dislodge the French. But it's a painful situation facing cav like that. I mean, you have a few choices, and it is kind of freezing me in a place where I want to advance, and that's why it's there. But Prussians pushing forward, beginning to open fire and fight. We had a couple of Prussian cav charges that destroyed one and sent another French unit running from Rainier, I think. But I lost a cav unit in the process, like a whole unit, so it can't really be considered a complete success. And then over here, yeah, the Russians beginning to engage, some artillery set up. I don't think the garrison is going to move across the stream and try to fight them. It's really not quality stuff. And the Swedes are all on the board now. In fact, that is the end of the reinforcements. There is no more coming on in the game. Every piece has at least stepped on the map. There's still a huge quantity of coalition forces that aren't on the map, but they got chased off. And technically, if I was playing this explicitly by the rules, they would not be coming back. And in fact, some of the stuff like Klenau here, Gilai and Liechtenstein, they wouldn't be on the board either. So, you know, if I played it strictly by the rules, the coalition has lost a massive, massive battle here, and I, you know, shouldn't even be fighting. How I'm gonna evaluate whether an army is destroyed or not, I still don't know. But yeah, and that's it for today. Just squeeze out one turn to keep me honest that I'm still playing, supposedly. The focus of the battle is actually changing, as though those coalition forces that got thrown off the map aren't coming back. You can start to see it aligning here with what's beginning to look like a line forming up against the two remaining armies. And I have trouble catching any kind of perspective here because I got the window right behind me. I wanted to keep a lot of my room. Didn't really think, hey, the battle's going to change its focus and I'm really going to need to see it from this angle instead. But it does become very clear when you start seeing, the French lines forming up there, artillery even forming here near the Partha River. And there's 2 extra corps going into this bloodbath. MacDonald, who was resting this turn, and Marmont, who's coming up. They're basically both aligned to being up in this area where Rainier and Mortier currently are trying to hold the line. There's not a whole lot happening there. I gotta think a little bit about this guy, because he probably has things he wants to do. Hold on. What I'm worried about there is, oh geez, I got some control over skirmishers that I may want to put into play for whatever value that is. We're not engaging fully here, not yet, but yeah, there's definitely possibility for some real ugly fighting happening here, and fighting that's going to cause more lost lambs, I'm sure, because somebody's going to end up dragging shit away with their corps that doesn't belong with them. And, somebody pointed out, hey, that kind of association is most likely to happen if a player actually, if the commanding officer were to assign the extra unit and everything. Yeah, I agree completely. It's just, I do a hand wavy thing to explain why it happens. I don't think the commanding officer should be free to detach and attach individual units or corps or anything, really. But if you look at the historical situation, they really would be, if MacDonald got half his corps hammered, he might well detach much of the good part of the corps to some other commander, or attach another portion of a corps to his good part and lead that, whichever way it goes, to deal with some objective with fresh troops or combat capable troops, while leaving the others behind in kind of a weird sort of, under a different command, essentially splitting a commander or something along those lines, but recombining and creating new forces. And stuff like that happened with decisions made either at the army or the corps level. What they certainly didn't happen was at sort of the brigade level, which is what I'm representing essentially, which is like, oh, I just decided to follow this guy instead. I mean, that seems entirely the rarity, but there's so much reluctance to attachment and detachment, et cetera, and possible bad effects to it, et cetera, that any rules set that gave you that kind of freedom would have to give all kind of disincentives to doing it. Most games, and I think this one actually does it, with a sort of, hey, you're allowed to detach and attach X amount of units total across the board or something like that, or each corps is allowed to detach a unit. We know NBS tries to handle that kind of distinction. When honestly, I kind of like what's happening right here, just in terms of like, it requires less effort for me and sometimes causes weird shit to happen, especially since it's obvious that it was already happening. Like Pujol came in with some of Latour's force. I think that's intended in the order of battle. And he finally got them back to where they belong. But, if you end up dispatching corps to very different areas of the board, people can end up very much not where they belong. One of the real oddities in the game. One of the things that doesn't happen very often, basically. Pujol got hit for 2 points, rolled a 6. That means he's wounded. He can't do anything for a turn. I don't know what the hell to do to mark that. If he was just dead, which is a 1 in 36 chance if you take 2 or more hits on a unit, a replacement would show up. Casualty levels are way too low in this game. With that, I mean, corps commanders never die, basically. And a few of them were wounded and knocked out of the battle and whatnot. I mean, a 6 and a 6 is what it takes to knock you out of the battle, right? Because anything else, you come back that many turns later. Anyway, in this case, it's 1 turn later. I almost feel like it's not worth dealing. Well, I feel like it's not worth dealing with. I don't know what to do. I think I'll just flip him over, and that'll kind of help remind me that he's not really having any effect on the battle. And that'll cause some issues to his unit. And I have a morale check to make too. If I can find my die. I don't know what happened to it. I rolled it, apparently. We finish up the 12:30 turn, and I was kind of considering, or the 12 a.m. turn, 12 p.m. Yeah. Because, of course, it changes from a.m. to p.m. at 12, which makes sense. It's post-meridian, but if you're thinking numerically, it feels like 1, 2, 3, etc., up to 12. It should stay a.m. through all that, and then turn to p.m. at 1, because you're starting counting at 1. Of course, we're actually using base a starting point of 0, like you would in computer classes or languages. Okay, so yeah, the drum beat of doom is starting. Here we have the Army of Silesia making its way onto the board. Army of Bohemia. Boy, do they look tiny. Like they're so beaten up. Yes, there's Army of Bohemia stretched out all over there, and it is actually a reasonable force, and there's more of it kicking back here. So it is not as weak as it looks, but this is what's coming on the board. But Army of Silesia, wow, I didn't realize how fucking hammered it got. That is, that's it. There's no more coming. So maybe they're not going to be as big a threat as I thought they would. Elsewhere, the Russian maneuvers to scare away the French cav. Some infantry coming up behind the guard. They blew and underwent some fire anyway. The other ones here ran away. They got destroyed by the artillery fire anyhow. Not much I can do about that. Let me just throw this, whatever the hell it is, because it's out for a full turn. Where things are kind of interesting, the fighting around here, the Liepzig garrison is proving not to be terribly sturdy, and some of its forces were extended out here. The gap is beginning to develop there, so we only have Mortier standing in the line there. Meanwhile, we do have 2 more big corps coming in to try to smash this, and then vague hopes that, like, some defense is enough to prevent the Army of Silesia from moving forward. And they're in such bad shape. You know, they've taken so many hits. We can take a look at their units. All 4 of their commands are demoralized. One of them shouldn't even be on the board. St. Priest. I gotta find St. Priest. He's not coming on. He's not coming back. He was desperation morale, and I already checked that with the stuff over on the Army of on the Bohemian Army of Bohemia. We had 1 unit that got destroyed there too. So yeah, I'll remove those. And I will count them as completely destroyed for whatever kind of balancing effort I have, because there has to be a balancing effort. There's no way, other than killing every last member of the old guard, to have put it into demoralization even. You know, every last strength point will be of reasonable morale. So I'm going to probably take some kind of guesstimate. Most of this is going to happen on feel more than anything else. Now, I was considering cutting the video and loading it up at this point, but tomorrow I have work and dancing, and after I finish this video, wherever ends up, I want to go to the Galicia game, which, because of the counter issue, I haven't even fully punched and sanded. I don't know how good a job. Side-mounted counters are weird. Some of them take to sanding pretty well, some of them do not. So this is going to stretch on a little bit more, probably another turn or two. And then whenever I have energy. See, the problem then is, hey, maybe I could squeeze a turn of this in on Saturday, but I don't know if I'll have energy to do Galicia and shit like that. But whenever I have the energy to start the new game, I will, and we'll put this on the ice for a while. But because of that kind of technical situation, I'm going to keep this video running. I don't think it really hurts, you know, if it ends up a 3-hour video or whatever. Most of them have been at 2. People have not, you know, most people aren't watching, so that's cool. Went a little hard last night and took most of the day off today. I had a meeting I have a meeting I have to make it to. But for the French, because I'm tired and they're tired, I rested a lot of their units. Honestly, I think that's okay, because I've got something that's close to a solid line at this point. Those extra corps, they're gonna make up the ability, like, if things go badly because of the fatigue levels of the units that are in the front here, like Renier and Mortier, but his stuff is so good that it's unlikely to be an issue. I've got 2 more corps to throw into the fight in that case. I also have 2 more corps to throw into the fight, and it's going to be hard to find ground for them, no matter what. But yeah, I think that's going to work out okay. The part that's not going to work out okay, I mean, I think it's going to be to my advantage to have all those extra forces there. The problem, of course, is I've left these big, you know, areas where I've got nothing defending, you know. Army of Bohemia, Army of Silesia can both come in without any issue. Anyway, I just wanted to show you the situation because I'm not going to be able to go right to the coalition. Oh, fuck. Oh, God. Right. So I managed to very, very slowly push out the coalition turn. Just, I'm not feeling it all badly. Just really, really lethargic. And I'm not talking about, well, I kept wandering away or anything. No, just everything was very slow and deliberate as I went. Just an odd sort of way for me because usually I'm very flitty. Okay, so Doktorov's forces pushing forward a little bit here with Bubna holding their flank. Over here, the Swedes are beginning to line up and get into position to help protect that Prussian flank. There's some danger right now that the French could smash into them, but if they did, they'd be exposing their own flank. They're already in a bulge here. It probably isn't that wise. I kind of did that because towns sort of provide you with things that you don't have to enter. You don't need pieces to hold necessarily. They're not really great places for the enemy to go into. They're not like an open gap in the line, or worse, like a hilltop or something that would give you lots of advantages on the enemy. So I kind of look at them as a way to extend the French lines that were stretched a little thin. Now, of course, they're getting so dense that that's not really an issue. And then a little bit of firefighting going on here as we're trying to align ourselves to do something about the artillery there. It's hard to get that out of the way. The garrison is looking weaker and weaker. I might just throw McDonald up a little early in terms of just going straight up and let Marmont take the other part of the line and pull that garrison out of there. Maybe pull the guards out as well. I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen. Rolling, because I'm trying to think what his... So, MacDonald's orders don't apply really anymore. That's part of the problem. MacDonald is looking at... Well, he actually could move here by his orders. His orders cover from Liepzig to Stutz, which didn't quite work. He was kind of the problematic person that I wrote his orders for without really understanding, well, one of several, that I wrote his orders for without really understanding what the battlefield was going to look like. Just in terms of like the positioning of the French troops. And that makes sense, but not with one player writing all the orders. It makes sense in terms of like, you know, he was getting orders from Ney and Napoleon was setting the other dispositions and Murat was setting some of them. I'm perfectly fine with things not quite looking right. But yeah. All right, I think that's it for this video, because although I have time to push out another one, I really don't want to. I've still got to take my bath from last night and try to decide if I want to go out, but I think I do. It's kind of hard not to. But yeah, the situation is very interesting. What is this? This is only the 4th day. Jeez. And it is right, because reinforcements were coming in on each of those other days. So I know I'm in the right place right now. I think. Unless those reinforcements that I've been pulling in come in on the 18th. I don't know. Worth a check. Pretty sure they come in on the 17th, though. Nope. They come in on the 18th. Okay, so I am actually a day further along. I forgot to move it forward at the nighttime. That makes more sense to me. That makes more sense because it felt like there were 4 complete days of fighting already. Okay, much, much happier. All right, up it goes.